A major raid by law enforcement turned up everything from guns.
So we know that marijuana, cocaine.
They arrested more than 10 people. Among those people,
crimes
6
that took
Police say the
place.
suspects
for their violent
pistol whipped
Arrested 3
and
people
stole
who they say were
purses.
involved in
More
a
than
drug
$3
operation.
million
Other arrests are expected to
cash in
follow.
marijuana.
It doesn't matter what you did to get in, it's what you do when you get out.
Welcome to My Healthy Mind. I'm Michael Hunter. A returning citizen is a person who rejoins the community after serving time in jail or prison. Today on My Healthy Mind, we're taking a hard look at what returning citizens face once outside. Things like difficulty finding a job, education, a place to live, a support system, not to mention the stigma associated with having done time. It can get in the way of starting over, and that forces many released inmates back to the kind of life that sent them to prison in the first place. Think about it. A person's criminal record is public information and easily checked on the internet. In this country, paying for your crime is supposed to even up the score, so you can move on. But that criminal record, it follows returning citizens into every corner of their new life. Today we have two men from both sides of the law, so to speak. Leon El Alamin spent 7 years in prison. He was released and eventually made a new life for himself against some pretty daunting odds. And we'll hear from Derek Jackson. He's the Director of Community Engagement at the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office. And he doesn't see his job as putting people behind bars. Instead, he works to keep them out. Leon, welcome to My Healthy Mind.
Thank you for having me.
So you had a pretty rough upbringing from the beginning. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I grew up in Flint, Michigan, in Flint's North Side in a single-parent household. Most of my adolescent years being raised by my grandmother, Miss Mattie K. Wilson, who raised me and my older sister at the time. We grew up in an environment that was very drug and crime-ridden, gang activities and things like that. It was a struggle, navigating that environment, but overall, I overcame it for the most part at a young age. I was a good kid. I graduated high school and had the opportunity to fulfill a dream for my grandmother, and who really impressed upon me the importance of education. It was really after, high school that I began to dibble and dab into that crime element that dominated that environment at the time, and really got involved and became a street hustler, and just fascinated by the things that I seen outside, the fast money, the pretty women, the nice cars, and the things like that, and the power that it drew in, and the people that were involved in that, the kind of respect that they got from that. And I ultimately became kind of good at it, to be honest. And so, but every good story has a negative side to it, so to say, and especially in that world, and I had the opportunity to see both sides of it.
And when you were the good kid versus I'll call it the bad kid, do you remember that defining moment when you decided, hey, I'm going to go over to the other side?
Yeah, actually it was, so the same year that I graduated in was 1999. But during that same year, I lost my grandfather. And that was a heavy blow to the household I was raised in and my grandmother, because they were like the backbone of my family. My mother was around, but again, she wasn't around. She struggled with drugs, alcohol, and she even struggled with physical abuse with some of the men that she was involved in. So when my grandfather passed, he was like that only center male figure that I really looked up to. And that's when I really started focusing my attention more into the streets and looking for that father figure, so to say, that individual, that big brother who can console me and help me heal from some things that I was dealing with, on top of having a family that was dysfunctional with a lot of alcohol and things like that. So it was around that time, like right after he passed in 1999, and right after I graduated is really when I really got involved in the streets. In the beginning, it's always like fun and excitement, like I said, that money and things like that. But it also has a scary side, a dark side that I wasn't really prepared for. And during that side, I seen things like my best friend get shot over $10 in a dice game. I had another friend get his head blown off at a corner store that everyone frequently went to on Halloween. So ultimately, I was set up and robbed by the same people I grew up and hustled with, and being shot in my head and in my back and left to die in that lifestyle, you know. So, you know, it really showed me both sides of it, and it's scary, it's real.
And when you experienced that trauma and that tragedy, though, you didn't get out of it right away. You stayed in that life.
You know, that's the scary thing about it. You know, you become addicted to it. After I got shot and was left to die, I was in a coma for 30 days. As I began to recover, I can remember the day I was close to getting ready to come back home, and the nurse came in, and she was coming to clean my wound and so forth. And at this time, I was a little heavier, and I was almost 300 pounds, actually. I used to have braids. And, you know, when she showed me that scar, I kind of freaked out a little bit, but it was something going on inside of me that needed to be addressed. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but once I was released, I went right back to that neighborhood, healed a little more, but I just felt like, you know, being a hustler was the only thing I knew how to do. So when that bandage kind of came off, I went right back to the streets. You know, I really didn't trust people at that time anymore, so I was kind of more solo. And I carried an AK-47 and a pistol at all times, you know, and I went right back to it. I got in those streets and had a hardened heart. You know, I wanted revenge. I was angry. I was living like on a suicide mission, you know, and it was some things really going on that I didn't know at the time that needed to be addressed. But yeah, I went right back to it.
And you said that you were entrenched again, but you used the word addiction. Tell me how that felt, where even in the midst of the tragedy, in the midst of the trauma and having been shot, being in a coma, you still went back to it. So what was that drive like?
It's that rush, you know, it's that rush, that fast money, you know, the power it brings, you know, women screaming your name like you an athlete or a superstar. You know, when you're growing up in the hood, or what we call the hood, the ghetto, you know, in poverty, you know, and you're trying to figure out a way to get out of that trap. So when you find some success, and unfortunately it was a negative side of finding success, you know, you crave it. You become addicted to it. That's what, you know, this is the only thing, this is what we identify and represented our manhood as a black man in these impoverished communities. You know, that was a form of expressing our manhood, and it was through the dope game, you know, and what that brought. So yeah, I was addicted to it.
So you had the drugs, now you got money, you got weapons, and you're staying out of jail though, but eventually.
Well, yeah, definitely, you know, that criminal lifestyle eventually will catch up with you. And what I call rented friends. So I still had a few individuals that I dealt with. And this particular individual, at the time I called him a friend. He was a Latino brother that I was dealing drugs with. And he eventually set me up to the police. And I never forget the night. It was actually at my house, and that was one of the old rules that, you know, you never deal drugs out of your house. But for some reason, you know, chasing that money, that fast life. And so he set me up with the police, and they came in kicking in the door. And it was crazy because my mother, my sister, my nieces and nephew were in the house, and my uncle. And when they came in, they put us all on the floor, you know, screaming with the dogs and things like that. And it was a really traumatic type of scene and type of situation that really, you know, changed my perspectives on things, you know, really changed my whole family perspective on life. You know, I didn't realize how much I had put their lives in danger, you know, because I was just living so fast.
And so you got busted.
Yeah, the lifestyle caught up with me. Ended up getting sentenced to 20 years and found myself in Jackson Correctional. And where from the first day when I walked in there, you know, I had the opportunity. It was a scary opportunity. I seen a man hang himself. And that's when I knew I was in the real deal place. You know, a different world, a different reality. Living like an animal kind of got me put in that cage, you know.
So did that hanging on day one make you say to yourself, hey, I'm going to be a different person? Or was there a period of time during your incarceration where you did not change? The same person that outside was still inside?
Well, actually, it was a process, but it definitely gave me a reality check. that I was in a different world, in a different place, and that it was just me, and I had to deal with the consequences and choices I was making prior to me being incarcerated. And that was where the beginning of the transformation really began to take place.
My job was causing me so much stress.
I felt disconnected and frightened.
I felt so isolated.
I was beginning to feel trapped, depressed. I never expected that to happen to me.
We think nobody else feels the pain that we feel, but that is so untrue.
It's good to be able to talk about it.
I was able to seek help. I found it from Team Wellness.
It's a sense of freedom.
Team Wellness Center. You are not alone.
So you're in Jackson prison, you're facing 20 years. What's going on in your mind?
My state of mind was very animalistic. I was out of shape. I almost weighed close to 300 pounds. I had been living savage, and it reflected in my behavior and my physical appearance. I didn't really care about anything or anyone at that point in time. I was at the lowest of the low in my life.
So the fact is that the majority of people who are incarcerated will be coming back to our neighborhoods at some point. I mean, as we started watching folks coming in and out of jail, sometimes 10 or 11 times or even more, we knew that something had to change, something had to be different. So we started looking at the root causes of why people are coming in and out so many times, and we wanted to know what we could do right now inside of our jail to make sure that people left us better than they came. It's not about being soft on crime, it's actually about being smarter on crime. And what that means is that we need to do a better job preparing them, but they also need to do a better job preparing themselves.
And what changed, or when did it change for you?
Well, it was a process. It wasn't immediate. It was only when I began to get shipped off to the facility that I ultimately began to serve a lot of my time, which was at Macomb Correctional Facility, that I had an opportunity to really reevaluate myself. And during that process, I met some individuals who were lifers, who I really clinged to, so to say, after observing them from being at the facility for about a year. I noticed some things about these two individuals, these two men. During the 2 hours of opportunity to be outside, I would observe them, and I noticed one day how they would at certain times leave, and I followed them. And when I followed them, I noticed that they were doing these different gestures and things. And one day I asked them with their body, and they told me that they were Muslims. They were Orthodox Muslims. And from there, we began to have a conversation about religion, things like that. They gave me books to read from all religions and so forth. And I began to study those books and see what this thing that had them so peaceful was about. And from there, we built a relationship. And it was beyond the religious aspect of it. It was just real grown folk talks, talking about the things that we used to do out there, the choices that we're making. What can we do to improve ourselves, even though we're inside this cage, so to say, and we built this bond. And after about a year, I began to go to one of the services on Friday, which is called Juma. And that's when you go to hear what we call as a cook bar, and they give the speech of the day. And it was things being said that just really touched my soul and motivated me. I discovered it was individuals going through similar things like I had been going through prior to going to prison. And before you know it, I took my shahada, which is an Arabic word. It simply means to declare that you accept this religion as your way of life. And that's really when the journey for me began to take off, and me having the opportunity to really reclaim my life again was through my spiritual discipline and the morals and things that I learned through the religion of Islam, like fasting, taking care of your health, and the importance of prayer and being connected to the Creator and respecting your fellow man. It was those things, along with exercising and just being accountable and accepting the things that I had did, is when I really began to see this transformation take place.
And accepting those things that you had done and deciding for yourself that you wanted to be better, different. What did the prison do to help you? What catalyst was there from a programming standpoint, if any?
Well, in the beginning, it really wasn't that many programs beyond like AA, and you can go to your religious service. It was very limited, especially the higher levels you are, you're limited to access to things like that. It's only when you get to like level 2 and level 1, when you're close to coming home, is when a lot of the programming is offered. So you really have to be creative in the higher levels and so forth. But it really gave me an opportunity. My family was, my mother is really began to overcome her addiction and clean herself up and really be involved. And that's really when our friendship and love for one another really connected. It was when I was incarcerated, and she would send me books to read beyond religion, with self-help books and things like that. And I began to recondition my mind to help change my thinking. Books like Malcolm X, books by Naim Akbar, and different individuals who, similar stories as myself, different times in life, who overcame their situations. And I began to draw information and strength from that.
And as you began to draw your strength, you got out and you look back over your shoulder and you say, wow, that was a great catalyst for me. What about the person who gets out and can't look over their shoulder and see a religious epiphany? Is there any hope, help, advice for them?
Absolutely, especially in these times now. You know, it's a lot of more programming and for individuals that's reentering into society and so forth. Mass incarceration is a huge issue across the nation. But it really boils down to individual taking the initiative to seek out those programs and things like that, and those mentors, just as I had on the inside. And one way of, at least in Flint, where we're doing it is through my organization, the MAID Institute. You know, providing those wraparound services is critical. And you have a short window when an individual is released from prison, because if not, you know, they're most of the time are being released back into the same environment that got them caught up the first time, or going back to these households that's broken and so forth, and that's detrimental to their success. So you have a short window, and it's important that we, as a community, wrap our arms around individuals like that and give them that support.
So once you got out, life got better, right?
No. Once I got out, I got hit with a harsh reality check.
Stress, depression, and severe mental illness can happen to anyone. Team Wellness Center has been helping those struggling with these conditions in southeastern Michigan.
No one should ever have to feel so alone.
Within 24 hours of reaching out to our team, members receive psychiatric evaluations and begin the necessary treatment for recovery.
Despite what you've been through, you can overcome.
Team Wellness Center. You are not alone.
When someone's inside, it's the perfect time to get their attention. I mean, maybe it's the first time they've been sober in a while, maybe they're taking their medications for their mental illness, or it's the first time they felt safe in this environment. So while we have them, it's a perfect opportunity to provide services, whether it's educational services, vocational training, healthcare like mental health for some of the mental health issues that they face. But even with all of that, it's really up to them to take advantage of the opportunities to be prepared to enter back into our neighborhoods. We do our part by setting the environment and giving them the opportunities, but really now it's up to them to do their part. We know that people offend and reoffend for a multitude of reasons, whether it's about lack of housing, lack of employment, undereducated because of a mental illness or because of addiction issues. And so what we provide in the jail, we want to make sure we continue to provide on the outside of the jail, helping people connect to those ongoing services to stay on the right path and never come back to us. We need to be there to offer the support in the community, just like we did in the jail, but also to hold them accountable when they're not doing what they're supposed to have done. Our job at the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office, just like any other jail across the country, isn't about just arresting someone. It's really about making sure they're better and helping to keep our communities safe.
You know, unfortunately, you would think after serving your time that you would have an opportunity to come back out into society and prove your worth. But, you know, once I was released, I was serving a second sentence. You know, I was discriminated against in housing, employment, institutions, educational institutions, and so forth.
And discriminated on the basis of?
Felony conviction. Yeah, my felony conviction hindered me from getting through a lot of doors and having an opportunity to prove my worth back into the community. And for someone coming home from prison, that's going to be very discouraging if you don't have any other support around you, influencing you and pushing you to keep going.
And your resources became, I know you smiled earlier when you said Maddie K. Wilson.
Yes, that's my grandmother. Yes.
So talk to me about those, how important the natural supports were.
No, it's kind of flipped. You know, my grandmother when I was younger, and now that I'm older, it's my mother. She had cleaned herself up, and to this day, she's been drug-free, alcohol-free for almost 15, 20, years and so forth. And she was my strongest supporter, and that was my backbone. Without her, eventually I would have had to follow back down that old path. But what she did was provide me a safe haven, a place to lay my head, and gave me an opportunity to continue to build on what I was talking to her about, wanting to give back to the community that I once helped destroy.
And the newfound discipline and the new person that you were, what are some of the distinct changes in your mind?
What it really did was drive me to be an activist, a community activist, and get really involved in the community, because I knew it wasn't just me affected by this and that's going to be going through this. I did some research and discovered that each year in Flint and Genesee County, on an average between 500 and 700 individuals return back from the prison incarceration back into their communities, whether it's state or federal. That's a lot of people. And they're going to be faced with these same barriers that I'm faced with. But unfortunately, they don't have that support that I may have. And that's what really drove me. I had the opportunity as a community activist to be engaged in some dialogue and advocate for banning the box. And what that is where employers can't ask you about your felony conviction unless they give you an interview, and then that gives you a greater opportunity to prove yourself and talk about the crime that you may have committed, things like that.
So those programs, the program that you made, offer a lot of assistance these days for returning citizens. How much responsibility should we put on the returning citizen as opposed to just the civic side of those programs?
It's a big responsibility. You have to want it for yourself first and foremost. Whether there's a MAID or a similar program like MAID, it always boils down to the individual. You have to want to change for yourself for any of these programs to work. Now, so I would say it's 50-50. So we put 50% of that on the individual, and then it's 50% on the community. Ultimately, individuals are going to come back to these communities, and we need to have these programs in place like the MAID Institute, providing housing, providing job training, providing mentorship.
Let me go back to the MAID, the ban on the box. Have you seen much progress or benefit since that inception of that law?
Yeah, it's been a lot of progress since the ban on the box, and we advocated for that. It really gives an individual an opportunity to just prove themselves from the time they're being released. What have you been doing? It pushes an employer to really look at that, and not necessarily the past criminal conviction, but what are you doing from the time you walked out of that prison gate? What have you been doing? What type of programs are you involved in? How have you been conducting yourself? Are you meeting the criteria of your parole? Things like that. So an individual can really have a chance and a shot to prove that they're worthy of a job opportunity and so forth.
And as we go through it with the returning citizens, they come back to the war-torn community, as you described, third world, right?
Yeah.
And they are homeless. They don't have means to take care of themselves yet. They get the interview and are turned down because of that felony conviction. What do you say to them right then at that moment?
Don't give up. Don't expect someone to make the type of investment in you that you got to make an investment into yourself. You can't be discouraged. You can't give up. You have to seek out the help. Programs like MAID Institute, if you're in my community in that area, or there's other programs out there in different areas, as I mentioned before. Seek those resources out. Don't let the system beat you that way and tear you down to where you feel like it's hopeless, that you don't have an opportunity, that you don't have a chance. If you're a spiritual person, rely on your faith. If you do have some family support, educate them so they can understand what you're going through to help you find these resources and assist you.
So Leon, tell me a little bit about some of the initiatives you're involved in.
So when we first started doing this important work, working with returning citizens, we launched a program called the 3 R's, which stands for Refine, Reform, and Rebuild. And that was the starting point of doing this incredible work and hard work. You know, and what we started doing was feeding individuals, working with the people that was coming out of the jails and prison, engaging them in community service work and so forth. But the need was so demanding, and it grew into the MADE Institute. And MADE stands for Money, Attitude, Direction, and Education. It's an acronym, and the reason we named it that is because we discovered these are all the things that individuals need once they're released from incarceration. They need money, but we want to teach them how to earn legal money and how to sustain and make that money work for them. That takes an attitude adjustment. And that's what we're doing. You're giving you direction so you can have that attitude adjustment to get to that legal money. And education is ongoing. That's academic education as well as your life lessons and so forth. Some of our strongest assets and individuals that can really come back and help our communities is individuals who've been through something. So that's kind of where that came from. But some of the things that we learned that are important and that we really wanted to tap into and that we do in service to this day is transitional housing. We also do peer-to-peer mentoring. We have a life skills program that focuses on anger management, substance abuse, financial literacy, health and wellness. We also just launched our first urban farming project. So we have a multiple holistic approach to providing services for individuals returning back into the community so they can be assets in their community.
And if you have one last word for everybody that's listening to you that has either been a returning citizen, know a returning citizen, or has been touched by somebody's life that's been incarcerated, what would you say to them?
Never give up. Continue to strive, fight, call on your higher power, whatever it is that gives you the strength to keep going, to be a change agent, a righteous individual, you know, whether that's your religion or so forth. But don't give up. Never give up, because there's still hope. As long as you're breathing, as long as you're alive, there's an opportunity, there's a chance. Oh, and another thing, never forget where you come from. Once you get your life in order, get employment, get housing, get your life back on track, reach back and help someone else who might be in the same spot as you. It's our responsibility. Who better yet to understand what you're going through than someone who's been through it? And that's what I would encourage individuals who are returning back into the community to do once their lives are in order. Each one reach one and then teach one.
Thank you for joining us today as we explored what it means to be a returning citizen. If you'd like to learn more about this or any other mental health topic, please visit us at myhealthymind.com. Follow us on Twitter at myhealthymind or on Facebook. We'll see you next week for another edition of My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it.